Hey everyone, Brian Bogner and Greg Towner here, and we have got an exciting video for you today. We just closed out a decade, right, 2010 to 2019, and now we're starting a new decade here, the 20s, and we want to talk to you about our themes for the next decade. Will it be the roaring 20s? Will it be, we don't know, but there's some things that we definitely know happened in the last decade, which shows here in 2010s. And then there's also some things that are happening here that we think are going to happen over the next decade. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it here. All right. Take it away, Greg.
Okay, great. Well, we actually think our first few themes really all tie in together. We've seen those last 10 years, you call it deflation, at least very low inflation, unless, of course, you're paying for college education or healthcare and things like that. For the most part, inflation has been very low, historically low over the last 10 years. We think that's poised to potentially change. And as we go on to the next slide, part of the reason for this is quantitative easing. The Federal Reserve here in the US and the central banks throughout the world have been adding to their balance sheet by several multiples over the last decade, keeping interest rates low, adding to the debt. We think at some point over these next 10 years, there's going to be some fatigue around what they can do and what people want them to keep doing. And tied in with all of this, these low rates that we've seen, it's allowed some financial engineering. Corporations, large and small, have been taking on debt at these low rates and largely using it to buy back shares, pay dividends, and that sort of thing. That's been fine while the rates have stayed low. But if they go up, you're going to have to see some deleveraging by a lot of these companies, and that's particularly concerning for the lower quality ones.
Another theme, after the market crash there in 2008, 2009, the financial industry got regulated. We had the Dodd bill that came through, a lot around banking and too big to fail and all that other kind of stuff. Well, we think that's transitioning now to technology, right? What's been in the news, right? Our data, what are companies using our data? Who are they selling it to illegally, legally, all this other stuff that's happening. And so these technology companies that are now the largest companies in the world, governments are coming in saying, hey, this isn't right, and we're starting to see more regulation. So from financial to technology, we think regulation is shifting. And another shift we see taking place, right? Over the last decade, since the low in 08, 09, U.S. stock market, large cap stocks have outperformed just about everything, okay? And we think that's going to change here internationally. And if you look, these are decades going back to 89, 99, and these are the top 10 companies in the world at that time. Well, look, in 89, you had a lot of internationals, especially a lot of Japanese companies because the market was doing well. Well, in 99, right after the tech bubble, it was pretty much all U.S. tech stocks. In 09, China had a big move, so you had a lot of Chinese companies. Brazil was also represented in here with the BRIC, things like that. And well, in 19, it's kind of back. You still have Alibaba and Tencent from China, but you have a lot of U.S. Look, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like 10 years from now, but our point is this: it's going to look different. It has over the last 40 years, and there's no reason for us to think it's going to be different this time.
Yeah, and part of that is the shift from globalization to protectionism. And we've already seen that in the trade wars with China and Europe and so forth. We think it's becoming more of actual policy strategy, and for various reasons and the effects it's going to have on supply chains, where you get your products. It's going to have a lot of wide-ranging effects across a number of industries. And so what's another big kind of politically oriented topic that we're seeing? We actually have some of the lowest tax rates we've ever had here in the US, particularly on the corporate side. And if you look at the way the government debt has increased over the last decade and is projected to increase going forward, that has to be paid for at some point, in some way. You're already seeing the push for higher taxes, particularly on corporations, the wealthy, and so forth. So next decade is likely to see higher taxes than we've seen the last decade. And we think these next couple of slides really kind of combine in together because they have to do with technology and how it will change, frankly, the world, but particularly industries and investing. We're starting to see a shift from human capital to robotics and automation. I know it's an area that we look to invest in Companies are trying to become more efficient, use robots that they can run 24 hours a day and not have to worry about employees and so forth. We're seeing more and more of that, and I expect more of it going forward. I think there's also potentially a huge change in transportation away from gasoline cars, or at least reduced. Not necessarily they're going to be gone in 10 years, but reduced. Big push for electric and maybe even self-driving cars. That may be looking out a little bit, but moving in that direction. And that has huge implications, not just for that specific industry, transportation, but wide-ranging. We're really keeping an eye on that.
And I think our last theme here is really the shift potentially from a traditional 4-year college degree to specific training. Let's be honest, right? Cost of college is basically, that inflation rate has outpaced everything. And if you look, you've read in the paper, you've seen the headlines about college debt. Well, the reality is people are graduating with 4-year degrees with this mountain of debt, and they can't find a job because their training is not really where the marketplace is or where the jobs are right now. So we think there's going to be a big shift there. Companies, universities, colleges are going to be coming together, providing very specific training to do very specific jobs. As Greg was just talking about, as things get more technical, robotics, automation, AI, all these things like that, you're going to need very specific training in these areas to do that. So we think there's also going to be a big shift there. So here are this is just kind of the summary here of what was going on last decade and what we think is going to be replacing it for this next decade. We do have a piece that's coming out, so if you get these emails, you'll get this delivered to you, where we're going to highlight what we're focusing on, even from an investment standpoint, and what we're looking at and some of the potential risks and things like that. So be looking for that in your inbox. If you don't get our emails, be sure to go to our website, subscribe, and get those there. If you have any questions, you know where to reach us, you know how to get a hold of us, and thank you so much for listening today.